Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, coming to you from a undisclosed location deep in the heart of North American flyover country. Beautiful day here, obviously, today. And I'm wearing youngest of some, I think, on my last day, and not trying to be silly or not take down the level of the show, but really doing it outside in a beautiful location and trying to make myself feel better about the horrific subject matter. I'd be frank with you, I'd rather not have to do these broadcasts at all. I wish this is something that we didn't have to talk about with anyone at any time, but unfortunately, it's part of the reality in the world that we live in, and we have to come against evil. Because as I always can't remember if it was Dietrich Bonhoeffer or Martin Niemöller, they said with such great reality that all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men and, of course, good women to do nothing. So we're out here talking about this when we'd rather not talk about it. We're out here dealing with this when we'd rather not deal with it. And not doing so because we want to be sensationalistic, but doing so because we want to be of service to the community and of service to people that are having to deal with and are still having to deal with some of these horrific issues confronting them in their lives. And that's what we're doing it for, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm trying to get where I can see the chat room. I don't usually pay a lot of attention to the chat room during these podcasts because they are so important. But we're talking about the darkest secret of Christianity. And I'm coming to you today from notes that I've made, and we're going to talk about part 4, I believe it is, and I'll link the other parts in the box below. But we are talking about the original sin, the book from Dr. D.C.A. Hillman, Original Sin and Child Rape in the Church. We're talking about the Roman Catholic, Roman Protestant Church. And today we're going to talk about how the church has used ritual rape to create a distinct and exclusive group of followers. You have to remember the historical context that the Christian church was fighting against institutional, we would call it paganism, but really institutional goddess worship, institutional worship of people that were following different gods and goddesses. We would call it paganism. I don't like that word because it has a pejorative type of appeal to us these days, but it's not pejorative at all. Pagan just really means not Christian. So the whole world was pagan in its religious practice, and along comes Christianity, and they had to do something to combat paganism as they wouldn't have survived. And they had to do something to carve out a distinctive and an exclusive clientele, if you will, for themselves. And they wanted to make it, ladies and gentlemen, so that believers that came to Christianity could never, ever go back to paganism, even if they wanted to. And as I was studying this, and this just drops into my mind now, I meant to write it down and did not. I remember the book, I believe it's Galatians, or it's Colossians, one of the two, where Paul is talking to people saying, oh, you foolish Galatians, you want to go back to days and weeks and seasons. And that's sold to us as people that wanted to go back to Judaism. But if you actually look at the history, ladies and gentlemen, the Galatians were old Celts. They had never been Jews. So there's no way that the Galatians could have been desiring to go back to Judaism, because to go back to something, you have to have at least been part of it at one time. And the Galatians were never, ever Celts, or they were never, ever Jews, but they were pagans. They were Celts. And I believe after this continued study that when the Apostle Paul started showing people the dark and the deep intricacies and mysteries of his church, which included ritual rape of young children, that's what caused many of these former pagans to say, this is not for us. We're going to leave. We're going to go back. Of course, it's pitched to us for the last 2,000 years of the Christian era that they were people that didn't have the faith. They were people that wanted to worship idols. They wanted to eat meat offered to idols. They wanted to do bad things. All they wanted to do was live according to their conscience and their dictates. And I'm convinced, ladies and gentlemen, that the defection of the Galatians was due in great part to their discovery that one of the foundational institutional sacraments of the Roman Catholic and Roman Protestant churches are the ritualistic rape, the ritualistic abuse, and even the ritualistic sacrifice of children. And if you think about in the book of Diana, where Paul, if it weren't for the Roman army, would have got killed, what was he doing? He was rallying the people against Diana, the goddess of love, the goddess of Eros, the goddess of desire. It all goes back to trying to destroy the sacred feminine, trying to destroy the wonder and the beauty and the awe of the reality of human sacred sexuality. And they did this, ladies and gentlemen. This sodomy was foundational. It was the foundational principle. It was a foundational principle of Christianity from the start. Whatever they're telling us today, oh, it's just a few bad priests, that's a lie. It's just a few bad pastors, that's a lie. Ladies and gentlemen, they have been practicing ritual child rape from day one in the Christian church, Roman Catholic and Roman Protestant. And this is why, ladies and gentlemen, that nothing ever gets done about it. This is why the church has known about this for 2,000 years. And in spite of the bad press, in spite of the threats of legal action, they know that they're a sovereign state. The Vatican's a sovereign state. The Protestants in America might be a little bit less ballsy about it because they're not private states. They're not sovereign nations. But the Catholic Church knows it's a sovereign nation, and they're not trying to do anything about it, and they're not ending it because it'd be like ending the Mass. Let me say it one more time so you understand it loud and clear. Ritual sodomy, ritual rape of boys and girls and women, and probably men, is a sacrament of the Roman Catholic Church, just as real and just as part of their everyday worship as the Mass is. And to understand this whole thing, folks, we've got to understand how Christians understood themselves at the beginning. Way back at the beginning when Paul started his competitive religion to the message of the masters that were trying to listen to the gods that remind us that we were divine, that we were sovereign, that we were free, to love ourselves, to love our neighbors. That wasn't going to fly. So Paul, and this is all the way down to 300-400 when Christianity was getting itself built together, they first started calling themselves, ladies and gentlemen, the Way. Paul's followers, the followers in 200, 300, 400 AD, they were calling themselves the Way. And if you want to do some study, look back across other religious beliefs and practices and segments and look for people calling themselves the Way and be very, very cautious and very, very careful. I'm very reluctant to go there, but I will have to go there at some point, but I'm not willing to go there yet. I'm not willing to name names yet. I'm not willing to go there yet. And Christians were considered odd because they were completely different than everybody else. And they were considered dangerous, ladies and gentlemen. They taught people to leave their families, just like Paul taught people to leave their families, just like Jesus taught people to leave their families. They withdrew from society. They kept to themselves. They isolated themselves from the active world. They believed that the end was near. They were waiting for all but them to die And they were the first monotheists, and they were the first intolerant group. Pagans could get together, have a good time, enjoy each other's company, and go about and worship their gods the way they wanted to do. Pagans didn't have this idea of exclusivity. They didn't have this idea of intolerance. That's a Christian thing. That's a brand new thing, ladies and gentlemen. A brand new thing. And people that leave their families, people that sell all of their property, all of their goods, think about Jesus, think about Paul, sell all your stuff, come follow me. People that withdraw from society, people that isolate themselves from the active world, people that believe the end is near, people that believe that everybody's going to die but them. Think about people in religious movements that believe this way. Think about who they are in your head from the times of Christ forward to the times of you and I. Think about who these people are, mark them, and ponder having fellowship with such people. Ponder believing such people. Ponder receiving such people's doctrine. I'm not saying exclude people as human beings. We all are humans. We all have the right to be wrong. But think about accepting doctrinal teaching from movements that teach that you should leave your family, from movements that teach that you should sell all your stuff, from movements that withdraw from society, from movements that isolate themselves from the outside world, from movements that believe that the end is near, and from movements that believe that everybody but them is going to die and go to a really bad place. From the times of the first century till that now the 21st century, think of those people, understand those people, and be cautious around those types of peoples and movements. The Christians were so diabolical. They were so militant that they actually incited the burning of Rome, the city. They incited the burning of the Library of Alexandria, the destruction of knowledge, the destruction of culture, the destruction of burning Rome to bring on what they thought would be the end of the world. It's just like Marzulli and Clark and that bunch trying to bring on the rapture now in the tribulation to bring on the end of the world. Same idiocracy, different idiots. And the Christians incited the burning of Rome to bring about the end of the world. The Way taught this. And Nero in 64 AD said it was the Christians that burned Rome. And guess what? He was right. He was accurate. Think about what Christianity was. Christianity came into a world where goddesses were revered, where gods were revered, and where really the leading voices were the oracles, which were young, feminine girls. They were young girls. And they came into this world that listened to young girls, that revered human sexuality, sacred sexuality, that revered the sacred feminine. And they came in with this bastardly masculine divinity that not only was derogatory towards sacred femininity and femininity in general, but he actually favored a specific ethnic group of people. As a pagan, as a worshiper of the gods and goddesses, you just had to be baffled. You're like, how in the world can these people worship this He-Man god and he's got a special people? Everybody knows that the gods don't have a special people. Everybody knows that the gods accept people for their merits and their actions and their activities, not because of the color of the skin or the type of ethnicity or blood that pumps through their veins. And Christianity allowed themselves and worked hard to get themselves into social power where they could actually arrest people for using sacred substances, arrest people for practicing sacred sexuality under laws of prostitution, which had never existed, arrest people for using sacred substances under laws of drugs that never existed. And not only that, Acts 5 shows us that Not only did the Christians ask you to leave your family, not only did the Christians ask you to give all your goods into things common, if you didn't, they killed you. Read the story of Ananias and Sapphira, who held back. They dared to hold back, not even all of it. They sold some land. They sold some land. Let's say this land that I'm sitting on was sold by the owner. And let's say it was, I don't know, I'll just pick a number, Bible college graduate, round number, $500,000. And let's say that the owner of this property belonged to a Christian church. Let's say that the owner of this property profited 500 grand and they took and gave 300 grand to the church. But somebody in the church worked in the real estate registry office and knows that the owner of this property got 500 and they only gave the church 300. Instead of being thankful for a $300,000 donation, instead of being thankful for such dedication, they would kill this person. That's what they did to Ananias and Sapphira. Because if you look at the text, it doesn't say that they didn't give the money for the land. It says they held back a part of it. They held back a part of it. No, I don't know if it was 500, 300, 200. You know what I'm talking about. But they killed them for holding back a part of the profits of the goods and the lands that they had sold in order to join the church. You hear what I'm saying? You couldn't be a Pauline follower of the way unless you sold all your shit. You couldn't be a Pauline follower of the way unless you gave all your stuff. It was all or nothing, cousins, back in those days. And now, even though they were fearing and guilting you from the beginning and killing you, they're still fearing you and guilting you. They may not be killing people yet, but they are still fearing and guilting you. It's been fear and guilt from the beginning. And many people have said this, and I hesitate to say it, but in 20 years of Christian ministry across many different churches, I was an evangelist. I went to a lot of different churches. It's been suggested that Christianity preys on those that are less sophisticated in their intellectual development. And it's true. I'm going to say it. A lot of people in churches aren't the sharpest tools in the shed. A lot of people in churches are not the sharpest knives in the drawer. But today, a lot of people, or a number of people within churches, are the sharpest tools in the shed. They are. They're building sheds and making tools. And yet they're still participating in these Christian rituals, which go back to the sodomizing of children. But I'm reminded of a verse that says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The Christian church has always been against and is still against knowledge, because knowledge is dangerous. They don't want you to know who the God of the Bible really is. They don't want you to know what the worship of the Bible is really all about. And they certainly don't want you to know that ritualized sodomy and rape of children has been a part of it from the very beginning. And the Christians invented this thing called faith. Faith in doctrine, faith in practice, faith in certain ways of doing things. There was never any faith in a particular creed in the world ever until Christianity came along. You never had to swear not to smoke or chew or hang out with those that do. You never had to swear allegiance to a specific rules of doctrine and covenant. You never had to do that. It was never done within spirituality up until the time of the Christians. It was never a virtue of the classic world, and Christianity pioneered it. Prior to Christianity, spirituality was based on the dynamics of individual experience with the divine. And I don't know about you, but I'm here today to advocate that if spirituality was based on the dynamics of individual experience with the divine before Christianity, I say it's time to end Christianity and go back to a post-Christian world where spirituality is based on the dynamics of an individual experience with the divine. What say you? I say it's time to recognize our own divinity, to recognize our own sovereignty, to recognize our own freedom, and to kick out this failed, flawed, bloody God that has been running this world for at least 6,000 years, and to take our place as divine, sovereign, and free individuals and create a world where spirituality and spiritual worth is based upon the dynamics of individual experiences with the divine or without the divine. Maybe just the divinity, the sovereignty, and freedom that lies within each and every single one of us, ladies and gentlemen. And not only did the Christians outlaw the sacramental use of sacred substances, not only did they outlaw the sacred practice, the open practice, the public practice of sacred sexuality, at least public within the halls of worship, they also outlawed the open celebration of feminine beauty. These are the idiots putting clothes on statues. These are the idiots destroying statues. These are the idiots veiling paintings. The pagan world, which means the before Christian world, recognized, ladies and gentlemen, that the veneration, the adoration, the recognition of the beauty of the female form, the beauty of the male form, even though I don't particularly find that so beautiful, you know what I'm talking about, was part of the realization of the great divine work of the gods. Merlin agrees. And what they did instead, the Christians, was turn sexual appeal into a crime, turn sexual desire into a crime. Look for groups that forbid sexuality. Look for groups that practice celibacy and enforce it, and be very, very careful. And they put the words in the mouth of this guy called Jesus that says somebody that even looks at a woman lustfully is committing a grievous sin, is in fire, and is in danger of going to hell. This was a slap in the face of the whole world, ladies and gentlemen. Sex itself became dirty and sinful and criminal, literally, and shameful. And all this was done to control female sexuality because the feminine voice of the pre-Christian spiritual world prevented the rise of Christianity and would have continued to prevent the rise of Christianity. And there's more to it. I'm going to be getting into that. I always say this year, it's already April. I'm going to be getting into the fact of why they tried to stop and why they're still trying to thwart our realization of sacred divinity, sacred sexuality, and the power and the power that is in it. There's a reason why. There's a reason why the greatest power is love, and there's a reason why the greatest expression of love in humanity amongst humans, or at least one of the greatest ones, can be our greatest power. And there's a reason why the church has done everything it can to keep us from knowing it and realizing it. And not only that, but to keep us feeling guilty about something that is divinely empowering. The Christian church was set up to purge men from universal sexual attraction and desire for women. And in order to do that, ritual sodomy was introduced. They knew that young boys would grow up thinking that young girls look good. What's a great way to mess somebody up, mess up their normal sexual development, mess up their normal sensual development, mess up their normal physical development? A great way to do it is to sodomize them in childhood. If you get sodomized in childhood, it becomes very, very difficult to have healthy, realistic views on sexuality. And the Christians knew that if they could sodomize children. They could prevent them from ever participating in pagan rituals because they had to be sexually virgins before and to be able to do that. So if they could prevent them from being virgins, they could prevent them from being involved in pagan rituals, which in their mind, if we give them the benefit of the doubt, was getting possessed by the devil. But we can't give them the benefit of that doubt. There's no excuse, there's no rationale, there's no sacredness, there's no divinity in raping a child. And a church that decided, if we want to keep these people from leaving the church to go back to their pagan roots, we got to screw every one of them. Is that a church you want to be a part of? And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They're not just screwing the innocents among us, they're screwing us all, because they've got us all warped. They've got us all jacked up. And their plan was to purge men from universal sexual attraction and desire for women, and to use ritual sodomy to do it. And they've been doing it for at least 2,000 years. Look around you, ladies and gentlemen. How well is their plan working? How messed up is this world in regards to human sexuality? How messed up are the men in this world in regards to sexual relationships with women? How messed up are the women in this world in regards to sexual relationships with men? We got people that don't even know who they are or what they are or who they want to have sex with. And don't think that the ritual sodomy from the beginning of the foundations of Western society don't have something to do with it. And don't think it's just about defeating the pagans. It's about defeating all of us and ensuring that we can't rise to the level of our divinity, that we can't rise to the level of our sovereignty, pardon me, and that we can't rise to the level of our freedom. I hate having to talk about this, but it has to be done. It has to be discussed. It has to be made known. And, ladies and gentlemen, once we know this, once we realize what they've done, and once we realize why they've done it, we can begin to redeem ourselves from the hell that they've created for us. We can begin to heal ourselves from the hell they've created for us. And we can begin to rediscover, ladies and gentlemen, perhaps the most powerful human expression of divinity within this dimension. And we can learn to use it. We can learn to manifest it. We can learn to apply it. And I'm telling you here today on, what is it, April the 5th, 2019, that which the Catholic and Roman Protestant churches sought to destroy by the institution of ritual sodomy, that very thing that they tried to destroy, will be the sacred silver bullet that goes right behind their collective ear and drops them to the ground as we step over their already rotting corpse to build a new and a better and a more divine, a more sovereign, and a more free world. Christianity has to die. And the only way for it to die is to kill it. And how do you kill a god? It's very simple. Remove his worship. My job, my calling in life is to let as many people know who the God of the Bible is, what the God of the Bible is, to let as many people know what Roman Catholicism is, what Roman Protestantism is, to let as many people know what the doctrines of the Jesuits are, so they can see how bad, how horrific, how filthy, how dirty, how damnable these people and these practices are. And I believe, ladies and gentlemen, that every person with a spark of divinity left in them will see this, will reject it, and will turn away from it. And if you don't, well, we'll have to see what happens. But we are the last generation of real humans. We're getting busy. We are the next generation of new gods. And we're getting ready. We're guiding our own spirits. We're mastering our own ascension. We're being our own gurus. We're asking questions. We're questioning answers. We're unindoctrinating ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. And we are just getting started. I can promise you that. From the heartland of America, on a beautiful day in a beautiful place, having to bring you such dark message is taxing, but it's cliche to say it, but they say it's always darkest before the dawn, and the exposing of darkness will allow us to embrace and enter into and channel and manifest our light. Never forget, we're divine. Never forget, we're sovereign. Never forget that we are free. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, and it's time for us to unindoctrinate ourselves.